значительной степени тот уровень благосостояния, который достигнут в бывших колониальных державах, он основан на ограблении Африки. Это всем известно хорошо. Да, собственно, исследователи в той же самой Европе этого и не скрывают. Так и есть. Они говорят, на горе и страданиях африканских народов построено в значительной степени, не говорю целиком и полностью, нет, но в значительной степени благополучие колониальных держав. Это очевидный факт. Ограбление, работорговля, конечно.
For decades, Africa's independence story has been told as history, something finished in the 1960s when colonial flags came down and new nations were born. But today, across African capitals, a different question is being whispered. Were we ever truly free? In late 2025, Russia stepped into that conversation, not with soldiers on the streets, but with words, deals, and quiet agreements. Moscow says Africa is ready for a new kind of independence, not political, but economic. Independence from foreign energy systems, from food dependence, from exporting raw wealth and importing finished goods. At the center of this message is Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Vershinin, who openly compared today's moment to Africa's liberation era of the 1960s. Since then, nuclear projects, mining partnerships, military cooperation, and education programs have spread across the continent. This is not just diplomacy. It may be the opening move of Africa's second liberation and a bold new role for Russia in shaping it. So what's really going on? Let's find out. It starts with a comparison that feels almost too big to say out loud.
Russia says its partnership with Africa is gaining momentum, with trade and political ties continuing to expand. Speaking in Cairo at the second ministerial conference of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that trade turnover between Russia and African countries grew by 13% in 2024.
Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin looks back more than 60 years and says Africa today is standing where it once stood in the 1960s. Back then, the enemy was obvious: colonial rule, foreign flags, direct political control. African nations fought, negotiated, and finally broke free. Now, he says, Africa faces a challenge just as hard, maybe harder. Not to win political freedom, but to win economic independence. That idea hits a nerve because many Africans already feel it. Yes, the flags are African. The presidents are African. The parliaments are African. But the systems that decide everyday life? Energy grids that barely work. Economies built around exporting raw minerals. Food is imported despite fertile land. Currencies tied to foreign powers. Loans that shape budgets before citizens ever do. Vershinin doesn't say Africa failed. He says Africa was never allowed to finish. And then he makes Russia's offer clear. Moscow wants to help Africa complete that unfinished liberation, the same way the Soviet Union once supported anti-colonial movements during the Cold War. That's not just nostalgia, it's a political signal. Because in 2025, Russia is not talking about flags and speeches. It's talking about power plants, mines, farms, soldiers, and schools. Quietly, across the continent, Russia is signing agreements understood by only a few headlines. Nuclear energy cooperation here, fertilizer and agriculture projects there, mining partnerships in one country, military training in another, scholarships and technical education spreading everywhere. On their own, each deal looks ordinary. Together, they start to look like a blueprint for something Russia keeps repeating in its language: sovereign development. The phrase sounds technical, but the meaning is blunt. Build your own energy, feed your own people, process your own resources, train your own engineers, defend your own borders. In other words, stop depending. For African leaders who have spent decades listening to Western donors explain why Africa must liberalize, privatize, reform, and wait, this message feels different. Russia is not saying change your politics, it's saying build your capacity. And that's why this comparison to the 1960s matters. Back then, independence meant removing colonial governors. Today, independence means removing economic choke points, the parts of the system that keep Africa supplying cheap raw wealth while buying back expensive finished products. Russia is telling Africa, We learned to survive sanctions, pressure, and isolation. We built under constraints. We can show you how to build under yours. Whether that's genuine solidarity or smart geopolitics is still unclear. But one thing is certain: Moscow is no longer watching Africa from a distance. It is inserting itself directly into the continent's most sensitive question: how to finally control its own future. So before anyone can judge whether this is liberation or just a new alliance, one thing must be understood first. What exactly is Russia putting on the table when it says it wants to help Africa win its second independence? Not speeches, not slogans, systems. The first place Russia is moving is energy, because without power, nothing else matters. Through its state nuclear company Rosatom, Moscow has signed cooperation agreements with several African countries to build nuclear power plants and research reactors. For nations trapped in cycles of blackouts and diesel generators, this isn't about prestige. It's about one thing: running factories, railways, hospitals, and cities without begging for electricity. Nuclear power means a long-term industrial backbone. Then come the resources. Africa is rich in uranium, gold, lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, the minerals modern economies depend on. For decades, these left Africa raw and came back expensive. Russia's pitch is different. Don't just dig, process. Build refineries, smelters, local plants. Keep more value inside the country instead of exporting it. Next is food. Russia knows food is power, so it is pushing fertilizer plants, grain cooperatives, irrigation support, and farm mechanization. The message is blunt. A continent with fertile land should not be importing basic food. Food self-sufficiency means stability, and stability means political control stays local. Then comes security. Where Western forces have pulled back or failed, Russia is stepping in with military training, equipment, and advisory support. African officers are trained in Russian academies. Units are equipped with Russian systems. The pitch again is simple: defend yourselves your way without conditions attached. And finally, knowledge. Thousands of African students are studying in Russian universities in engineering, medicine, agriculture, and nuclear sciences. This isn't charity, it's long-term influence, shaping the people who will manage Africa's future industries and institutions. Put together, you start to see the structure. Energy to run the industry, resources refined at home, food to stabilize society, security to protect it, skills to sustain it. This is not random aid, it's an economic architecture. Russia calls it helping Africa build sovereign production capacity, the ability to produce what you need using your own resources, your own people, and your own systems. And that's why Vershinin dares to compare it to the 1960s. Because back then, independence meant removing foreign rulers. Now Russia says independence means removing foreign dependence from the foundations of daily life. But here's the part that can't be ignored. Russia is not doing this quietly out of goodwill. It's doing it loudly, at a time when it is locked in open confrontation with the West, cut off from many markets, and searching for partners who won't follow Western pressure. Which leads to the uncomfortable truth that hangs over all these deals. Is Russia really building Africa's independence, or is it building a new front in its own global struggle? So the question now becomes, why is Moscow so determined to anchor itself inside Africa's future, and what does Russia stand to gain if Africa truly breaks free? Russia understands something many still underestimate. In the next few decades, Africa will hold the world's fastest-growing population, some of its most critical minerals, and dozens of votes in every major international forum. Any power that wants to shape the future cannot afford to be absent from Africa. But there's a more urgent reason. Russia is fighting to survive outside a Western-controlled system. Sanctions have cut it off from European markets. Financial pressure has tried to isolate its banks. Technology bans have aimed to slow down its industries. Moscow has learned, the hard way, what dependence on hostile systems feels like. So when Russia talks to Africa about sovereignty, it's not theoretical. It's personal. Russia is saying, we know what it means when others can switch off your access. We had to learn how to build under pressure. Now we can share that experience. At the same time, helping Africa weaken its dependence on Western systems serves Russia's strategic goal perfectly. Every African power plant built outside Western financing. Every fertilizer plant reduces food imports. Every refinery processing minerals locally. Every army trained without NATO oversight shrinks the West's leverage. So Russia's logic is simple. An economically sovereign Africa makes a multipolar world real, and that world benefits Russia. But Moscow doesn't sell this as a geopolitical fight. It sells it as history. It reminds Africans that when independence movements swept the continent in the 1960s, it was the Soviet Union that openly backed liberation groups, while many Western states still protected colonial interests. The message is subtle but powerful. We stood with you then, we can stand with you now. That story matters. Not because it's perfect history, but because it resonates with a continent that still feels the weight of extraction, unequal trade, and policy control. Yet Russia is not pretending to be neutral. It wants access to Africa's minerals. It wants markets for its technology and weapons. It wants a military presence in strategic zones. It wants allies in global institutions. In short, Russia wants influence. But here's where things change. Unlike in the Cold War, Africa is no longer a passive arena. It is not choosing between one bloc and another. It is choosing options. African leaders today talk openly about diversification, not replacing Western dependence with Russian dependence, but breaking dependence altogether by balancing multiple partners. Russia is one piece of that strategy. And that's what makes this moment different from the past. This is not about joining Moscow's camp. It's about using Moscow to expand Africa's room to maneuver. Still, power never comes without cost, which leads to the question no one can avoid. Is this partnership truly helping Africa rise on its own terms? Or is Russia simply reshaping dependency into a new form that suits its interests better? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The honest answer is, both possibilities exist at the same time. Russia is not presenting itself as Africa's teacher or judge. Unlike Western institutions that often arrive with checklists, governance reforms, policy shifts, privatization rules, and political alignment, Moscow's pitch is stripped down. It says, we don't tell you how to run your politics. We help you build capacity. That matters. For many African governments, Western partnerships have felt like economic help tied to political obedience. Loans that reshape budgets, aid that comes with lectures, trade deals that lock Africa into exporting cheap raw materials. Russia avoids that language. It talks about pragmatism, power plants, equipment, training, skills, projects that can be pointed to and measured. And that's why some African leaders see Russia not as a savior, but as a useful counterweight. A way to say to the West, we have other doors now. But let's not romanticize it. Russia is a power, and powers never act without interests. Russia wants access to strategic minerals, markets for its nuclear and defense industries, military footholds near key regions, political allies in global institutions. These are not hidden. They are simply framed as a mutual benefit. So what makes this different from old patterns? One thing, Africa has leverage this time. In the past, African states had limited choices. Today they negotiate in a world where China builds roads, the Gulf funds ports, Turkey sells drones, the West offers markets, and Russia offers energy and security. This competition gives African governments room to maneuver, to demand better terms, to avoid single-source dependence, to play partners against each other. That's the real shift. Africa is no longer just a recipient. It's becoming a broker. And that changes what Russia's presence can mean. If African leaders use Russian cooperation to build domestic industries, local skills, and independent systems, then Russia becomes a tool for sovereignty. If they simply sign contracts, export resources, and import expertise forever, then Russia becomes just another layer of dependence. The structure allows both outcomes, which is why this moment is dangerous and powerful at the same time. Because Russia's no-conditions approach removes one barrier, but also removes one protection. It puts responsibility squarely on African leadership to shape outcomes. No one else will. And that leads to the next turning point in the story. Even if Russia's intentions are mixed and Africa's choices are uncertain, one thing is clear. This partnership only matters if it changes real life on the ground. So the question becomes, Can these Russian-backed deals actually transform Africa's economies? Or will they fade into the long list of promises that never built lasting power? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. They can, but only if Africa treats them as tools, not trophies. Because real independence doesn't come from signing agreements. It comes from what those agreements build after the cameras are gone. A nuclear plant matters only if it powers African factories, not just cities. A mining deal matters only if refineries rise beside the pits. Fertilizer plants matter only if farms stop depending on imports. Military training matters only if armies become professional, accountable, and locally sustained. Scholarships matter only if graduates come home to build systems, not just careers. This is where most past partnerships failed. Africa was given projects, but not always industries. It got roads, but not supply chains. It got aid, but not self-reliance. Russia's language is different. It keeps repeating capacity. Build the ability to produce. Build the ability to maintain. Build the ability to replace foreigners with locals. That's what would make this a true second independence. Because economic freedom in 2025 means producing energy at scale, processing your own resources, feeding your population, financing projects without begging, defending borders without outsourcing. If Russian cooperation pushes Africa in that direction, then history will remember this moment as the time Africa finally finished the revolution it started in the 1960s. But here's the risk. If African leaders chase prestige projects instead of productive systems, if contracts enrich elites but not industries, if skills stay foreign and maintenance depends on outsiders, then nothing really changes. The power plant becomes another symbol. The refinery becomes another export gate. The military deal becomes another dependency. And Africa stays trapped in a cycle where infrastructure exists, but control does not. That's why this moment is not about Russia's capacity. Russia clearly has tools to offer. It's about Africa's discipline. Discipline to demand local training. Discipline to insist on technology transfer. Discipline to tie projects to national plans. Discipline to think in decades, not headlines. Because sovereignty isn't something another power can give. It's something you force into existence through systems. Russia can help build the scaffolding, but Africa has to build the house, which brings the story to its final question. If Africa now has partners, leverage, and a global shift working in its favor, will it finally seize this chance to complete its independence or let it dissolve into just another round of global power games? The answer is simple. Even if the task is not, no one will hand Africa its independence. Not Russia, not China, not the West. They will offer deals, they will offer projects, they will offer partnerships. But independence is built only when Africa uses those offers to construct its own strength. What makes this moment different from every era before is timing. The world is no longer dominated by one system. The West is challenged. New powers are competing. Sanctions, wars, and economic shocks are breaking old certainties. In that disorder, Africa finally has room to maneuver. Russia sees that opening and moves fast. It offers energy where others hesitate, security where others withdraw, training where others lecture. It wraps its interests in Africa's language of sovereignty and says, "Let's build together." Africa listens because for the first time in decades, it isn't cornered. It can choose, it can negotiate, it can walk away. That alone is a form of power. But power without direction becomes drift. If Africa treats Russia as a replacement for the West, the story ends the same way it always has. New partners, same dependence. If Africa treats Russia as one tool among many to break structural weakness, then this moment becomes historic. Then nuclear plants turn into industrial zones. Refineries turn minerals into finished goods. Farms turn land into food security. Schools turn youth into engineers. Armies turn instability into control. That is what a second independence would look like. Not parades, not slogans, but systems that work without asking permission. Russia can help build those systems, but Russia cannot decide how they are used. That choice belongs to African leadership, African institutions, and African societies. History will not judge this era by how many deals were signed in Moscow or African capitals. It will judge it by one question. Did Africa finally stop being a supplier of raw wealth and start becoming a producer of finished power? If the answer is yes, then the words spoken by Sergei Vershinin in 2025 will be remembered as more than diplomacy. They will mark the moment Africa began to finish what it started in the 1960s. If the answer is no, then this will be remembered as just another chapter where global powers competed and Africa paid the cost. And that leaves us with the only question that truly matters. Will Africa use Russia's hand to lift itself, or let itself be pulled into another game not of its making? Let us know in the comments section, will it be a win-win? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.